When you think about ancient Greece, you picture chaos, Spartan warriors, gods throwing lightning bolts, philosophers arguing in crowded marketplaces, men obsessed with honor, reputation, and winning at all costs. Not exactly a culture known for calm. And yet, out of that noise came some of the calmest, most unshakable minds in human history. Men who could stand in the middle of conflict and feel nothing. Not numb, not cold, just completely undisturbed. So calm that other people started to feel uncomfortable around them. Because when someone has nothing to lose, no reaction to provoke, no fear to exploit, you can't control them. And there was one man who took this to a level so extreme, so precise, that even Alexander the Great, a man who had conquered half the known world, would seek him out before battles. Not for strategy, not for advice, just to sit near him, to feel what it was like to be around someone who feared absolutely nothing. His name was Piro, and his method is something you can start using today. The man who had nothing and needed nothing. Piro was born around 360 BC in the city of Elis. No noble background, no political power, no legendary story. He started as a painter, just a regular man in a world obsessed with greatness. And then at around 30 years old, he did something unexpected. He joined the army of Alexander the Great, which meant stepping into one of the most dangerous environments imaginable. War, chaos, uncertainty, death constantly within reach. And here's what made him different. While other soldiers were anxious, aggressive, or terrified, Piro was completely unbothered. Not pretending, not suppressing fear, actually untouched by it. He wasn't trying to be brave, he just wasn't afraid. What he saw that changed everything. During those campaigns, Piro traveled far beyond Greece, into places like India where he encountered entirely different ways of thinking. Philosophies that didn't revolve around control, status, or winning, but detachment. And something clicked. He realized that most of what people fear isn't reality. It's interpretation. It's the story your mind tells you about what might happen. And once he saw that, he couldn't unsee it. The problem? You make yourself nervous. When Piro returned to Greece, people expected stories about war. Instead, he gave them something far more unsettling, a new way of thinking. He said, "Most people don't get made nervous by situations. They make themselves nervous before the situation even begins." Think about it. You walk into a room. Before anything happens, your mind starts running. What if I embarrass myself? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if I look stupid? Nothing has happened yet, but your body is already reacting like it has. Heart racing, muscles tight, voice slightly off. You've already lost control and nobody even did anything to you. Piro saw this as the root of almost all anxiety. Not the world, but your interpretation of it. The state he aimed for. Ataraxia. He called his ideal state ataraxia, a word that means something close to complete inner unshakability. Not calm under pressure, not managing your emotions. Something deeper. A state where there is nothing inside you left to react. No need for approval, no fear of judgment, no attachment to outcomes, no internal tension waiting to be triggered. You're not holding yourself together. There's just nothing pulling you apart. The method? Simple, but brutal. Now here's where it gets interesting, because Piro didn't just describe this state, he had a method for reaching it. Before any situation that could create anxiety, he would ask himself one question. What is the worst thing that actually happens here? Not the dramatic version your mind creates, the real, physical, concrete outcome. Then he would ask a second question. Can I survive that? And almost every time, the answer was yes. You embarrass yourself? You survive. You fail? You survive. You lose the opportunity? You survive. You get judged, you survive. Once you accept the worst outcome as survivable, everything above it loses its power. The part most people skip. Here's where people get this wrong. They stop halfway. They ask, what if something bad happens? And then panic. Piro went all the way, every time. A student once asked him, but what if people think badly of you? And Piro responded with one question, and then what? That's it. The student had no answer, because that's the end of the chain. People think badly of you. And then what? Nothing. Life continues. The fear collapses. Why this method makes people nervous? Here's the strange side effect of this method. When you truly accept outcomes, you stop needing anything from the room. You're not there to impress, you're not there to win, you're not there to avoid embarrassment. You're just there. And that changes everything. Because most social dynamics are built on invisible need. People can feel when you want approval. They can feel when you're trying to prove something, and they can use that. But when you need nothing, there's nothing to use against you. And that makes people uncomfortable because they can't predict you, they can't control you, they can't move you. A real-world example. Let's bring this out of philosophy and into reality. Imagine this. You're called out in front of a group, maybe a boss, a teacher, someone with authority. They raise their voice. They expect you to shrink, to apologize excessively, to match their emotional intensity. But instead, you've already done the work. What's the worst that happens? You get fired. And then what? You find another job. That's it. That's the entire disaster. So when the moment comes, you don't react. You respond. Calmly, directly, without emotional noise. And suddenly, something strange happens. The person who was trying to dominate the situation loses momentum. Because they expected resistance or submission, they got neither. They swung and hit nothing. Why this works psychologically. Your brain is designed to protect you, but it doesn't always distinguish between real danger and imagined danger. Social rejection can trigger the same stress response as physical threat, so your brain exaggerates. It turns small risks into catastrophic outcomes. Piro's method interrupts that loop. It forces clarity. It replaces vague fear with concrete reality. And once reality is clear, fear has nowhere to hide. The hidden truth about calm people. People think calmness is about personality. It's not. It's about perspective. Calm people aren't less emotional. They just don't believe every thought their mind produces. They question it. They follow it to the end. And most of the time, they realize there was never anything to fear in the first place. How to use this today. You don't need to become a philosopher. You don't need years of training. Just do this. Before any situation that makes you nervous, define the worst realistic outcome. Follow it to the end. Ask yourself if you survive it. Accept it completely. Not halfway, completely. Then walk into the situation. Watch what happens. Final thought. The room only has power over the person who needs something from it. Approval, validation, control. Remove the need, and the power disappears. That's what Piro understood. And that's why even Alexander the Great, a man feared by entire nations, would sit beside him before battles. Because real power isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, it isn't trying to prove anything. Real power is the absence of fear, and once you feel that, you don't just become calm, you become untouchable.